What's going on, everybody? This is Chris Bright. We're here today doing another town hall. Went really well last time, so we figured let's keep it going. This is my field director, Julian Aciard. I always used to say former Marine, but you correct me every time because it's once a Marine, always a Marine. But yeah, Ace and I we kind of connected at the hip as we move around the district, kind of talking to folks, and so I thought it would make it a little bit more conversational if we sit here. So, what's going on, man?
I'm just sending this out to everybody. And you know what? The last couple weeks have been insane, like absolutely insane. Well, besides the heat up here,
yeah.
So it's like multiple shirt changes a day.
Yeah. Dude, remember when I was we were up in North Conway like 2 weeks ago, and great speech. We got out to the car, man, and I was so hot, right? But yeah, it's been intense. I think I looked at the calendar. We don't have a day off. You're welcome, by the way, until July 28th right now. So
no, and that's fantastic. The one thing that I always love about being on a campaign trail is the busier the better, because that means the more people you like. When I ran last time, it means the more people you get to meet.
That's right.
And out of everything, the one thing I do know is every single person who voted for me, I touched personally. I talked to personally.
Yeah.
And you have that huge connection with people. Not just, most candidates, you go into an event, and I think you're pretty good about this, as why it's so much fun to work with you is you go into an event, most candidates, they talk to their teams, they read their speech 5 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever is prepared before they go up there. They're not really sure of the remarks. They don't even know really the room of people that they're talking to. And then the first thing that they do is, they go through their 2-minute speech. But after you get to know people, and you hang around at the end of the event and you get to talk to people, because that's where the real conversation happens.
Yeah, that's right.
Everyone's rushing in, trying to find their seats at the beginning, but afterwards, it's like, all right, let me get to know this guy. And once you get to know people, then people connect with you and they can really see what you're really about when you're off stage and you're not going through your remarks and you're not necessarily answering questions, and it's not so robotic and it's not moderated.
Yeah.
And you have time to really dig in and answer anybody's concerns.
Well, that's
and I think you did great with that up in North Conway. I think you did great with that, and you're really good at working the room and talking to people and making real legitimate connections.
Yeah, I guess one of the reasons I ran was I just felt like nobody listened, right? Like politicians would come and they'd speak and it was just all them. Blah, 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 blah. This is what I believe in. This is what I'm going to do. This is who I am. Done with the speech, and then I'm out. I don't even want to hang around and listen to anybody else talk. And I thought, man, the title of the job that we're running for is representative.
Yep.
So how do you represent the plurality if it's all about you? And I've said this on the campaign trail. I know you've heard it, but we talk about it's not just about Chris Bright. It's about representing the views of the first congressional district here in New Hampshire. So. Yeah. There's parts of this job that I don't like. Right? We've been grinding. There's not been a day off.
You hate
the
talking about
cold
yourself.
calls. Yeah, I don't know. Does anybody like talking about themselves? I don't know. Like it feels uncomfortable. But
you'd be surprised in politics. There's a lot of people who love talking about themselves.
Yeah. So speaking of that, like we're going to talk about my story, which you've been coaxing me now for weeks to put this on camera and kind of talk through it. I've selectively talked about my story. I mean, it's a tough one to tell. In fact, I was embarrassed about my personal story for years. I didn't share that with a soul. In fact, some of my closest friends, I just went dark on. Mm-hmm. And when I tell it, I'll tell you the point where I realized I needed to be a little bit more vocal about it. But certainly coming on, I was always kind of a private guy. I liked the anonymity I had here in New Hampshire. Raising my kids, I could walk in the grocery store. People didn't hate me just because I had a Republican, after my name. Yeah. But I mentioned it one time. I think the first time I talked about that was we were out in Merrimack. Remember that outdoor event at the taco place? And something just came over me. I don't know. I just felt it that day, and I shared a little bit. Was a little bit vulnerable with that group, and it resonated. and then we really went for it.
Oh yeah.
I laid it out that day in North Conway, and then again, of course, we had the event last night, and so I had that whole speech ready to go last night. We were going to talk about kind of teamwork and my role and the voters' role, and you looked it over, and you're like, it's a good speech. Yeah. But I said, but what? And what did you say?
You got to tell your story. Any chance you get a chance to tell your story, any chance you get to tell who you are, because I think I've worked in political strategy for years. I've worked with many candidates, and what I've always found is if people get to know the person, the actual person, and not the robotic politician,
yeah,
they're more comforted in the idea of voting for you and supporting you, because not only do now I know your policy, but I understand where you're coming from with it. And even if I do disagree with you on one or two things,
right,
the fact that I understand where you're coming from with it, now I know that you're addressing it with a level of sincerity that means that it's not something that is a fly-by-night policy. It didn't come from a think tank. It didn't come from what I said last lecture is sweaty men in blue blazers arguing in cigar smoke-filled rooms. And that's like
a terrible image, by the way.
It really is. But that's how a lot of policy comes down, is you got all these think tanks who they come up with things,
no, I get
and
it.
We're supposed to parrot them. But I see your story as something that connects with the vast majority of people, especially men in society, the mental health crisis that we're going through, the masculinity crisis we're going through. You have people who feel hopeless and dejected because they don't know the path that the country is going down.
Yeah.
And it seems, you tune into the media, whether you're tuning into pundits and influencers, or you're tuning into, say, Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, or any of the major networks, you hear doom and gloom, and your story shows, like, look, no matter how dark it may seem, you have that shot to take that.
You can change your story,
yeah,
at any time, and it might not happen overnight, is certainly the case, but yeah, it is one I think that now I've come to see, why that happened to me. It's one of inspiration. So I guess 5:10, we should probably get into this. After weeks of coaxing, here we are on camera, but we'll talk this thing through. If you do have comments, we are streaming on Facebook. I think this one right now is coming through Facebook. All the comments and the 34 people in the room are coming through Facebook, but we're also on Twitter. We're also on Instagram. So if you send us a note or a comment through any one of those, we'll see it, and I could certainly respond to that. But I'll do a little bit more talking, on this one. So my story. I'm a West Point graduate, and I guess that even started back then. So I'm originally from New Jersey. I was told I wanted to go to West Point when I was, going into my sophomore year. My dad took me to a football game there and was like, "Hey, we're going." I didn't even want to go that day, and I was like, "Nope, you're going." And at that point, I fell in love with the United States Military Academy and kind of worked my ass off to get into that place. And I was told going in that year that you're not getting in. So I was prepared to go to New Mexico Military Institute. And by the grace of God, in May of 1994, some dude in New Jersey decided he didn't want to go to West Point, gave up his slot. And by the way, if you're out there and you were one of the guys in New Jersey that didn't go in 1994, thank you. But I got that alternate slot. And so I went in, and tough place to go through. But it absolutely shaped who I am. I went to airborne school there. I studied under H.R. McMaster, who went on to become Trump's national security advisor, and he was a war hero in the first Gulf War. Chris Gibson, who ended up to go on and become Congressman Chris Gibson, taught me American politics. So just the best of leaders and academics at that place, premier leadership institution. And then 1 year I worked in the U.S. Embassy over in Beijing when Hong Kong was going back to the mainland, studied Chinese. So came out of West Point very eager to go out and lead soldiers, and I was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Army Corps of Engineers. I liked the Army Corps of Engineers because out of all of the different Army branches, it was the most diverse. And so I was deployed to Egypt. I went and did a stint in Bosnia, which actually got cut short because, the work we were doing kind of on nation building, the country became destabilized again. We went home early. And then I went back to Kosovo, a different part of the Balkans. So what was cool about Bosnia was, it was twofold. One, I worked in a town called Srebrenica, where we helped women that were victims of genocide, where every male essentially over the age of 14 was killed. And went into that town and helped them build businesses. And we did a lot of work with USAID to kind of figure out what would help the town and these people get back on track. Incredibly rewarding. What wasn't lost on me in Bosnia was, as we were driving back and forth, on different missions, a lot of times we were passing through what became known as Sniper Alley in Sarajevo. And I would think to myself, one, geez, I hope we don't get sniped. But more importantly, 16 years earlier, they hosted the Winter Olympics right in that city. And that was so impactful to me as a young 20-year-old Army officer that, man, bad leadership and bad government can quickly cause the decline of a country. So came back, went over to Kosovo. I was second in command of a company there. We had soldiers deployed all around the country. One of the cool things that I did was I was the liaison with this group called the TMK, which was the Kosovo Protection Corps. The TMK is the Albanian acronym for that. And one of the biggest things we did was, there was this town called Pasjani, and the bridge was destroyed between there. Kind of split the town in half. It damaged them economically. And up until that point, whenever they came to ask us for help, we'd write them a check, or, it was just kind of like, give a man a fish. And we had a very forward-thinking commander over in Kosovo that said, we have to start getting these folks to work together. And oh, by the way, we're here to try to get the Albanians and Serbs to work together. And Bright, you're working with this Albanian group. This is a Serbian town. I want you to go into that town and see if we can't get the Albanians and Serbs to work together. And it was a tough mission. As we've got our own race issues here, but honestly, it doesn't even compare to the hundreds of years of just animosity that these people had towards each other. And so worked with them, and it took about 4 or 5 months of just negotiating and trying to find common ground to get these people to work together. Ultimately, we got the bridge built. And for me, I think that solidified the fire inside of me that was like, I really like doing the type of work where the work is actually bigger than myself, and it's lasting, and it leaves a legacy. So came back to the U.S. I was promoted to captain. I commanded 2 different companies in the Army at Fort Leonard Wood, 250 to 275 plus people. And then, we were in the middle of the war. We had lost 14 classmates, I think, at that point, maybe not that many. But we had certainly lost a handful, and a couple really close friends had passed. And my wife and I at the time decided it was time to get out. And so we both got out of the Army. I got a master's degree in public policy, and then I got a master's degree from MIT, which is ultimately what brought me to New England. So things were going well. 2 great grad schools. In 2000, I won this Grizzly Award here, which was the Active Duty Platoon Leader of the Year. So I was the top platoon leader in the entire United States Army in 2000. Got to meet President Bush during that period. Things were going well. And I thought, I'm going to get out of the Army. I'm going to start making some good money. It's going to be smooth sailing from here. Hold my beer. And so graduated from MIT right into the global recession. So I had to finish her. I ended up getting divorced, kind of accelerated my time through MIT, and finished classes 3 out of the 4 semesters. So just had to get right to work. Went to work for a international real estate firm right out of the bat. Thought that's what I wanted to do. Lasted there for just under a year. The housing bubble pops, economy pops. And my boss is like, look, man, we just don't know how long this is going to take. Got to let you go. So very first job out in the civilian world, young, bushy tail, got all these degrees, thinking I'm just going to be making it. Hard reality. So I pivoted and I went to work for a construction company in Newton, thinking, okay, I did a lot of this stuff in the military. I liked construction. I'll be a good fit for that. went to work for them, and within about, honestly, 2 months into this job, they started laying people off. And I was laid off in like the third or fourth round of those layoffs, and the company barely survived. I mean, great leadership. Joe, the CEO, pulled the company through, but they had to let go about 90% of the company to survive that downturn. So my first 2 jobs out of the Army, I was basically let go. Went down to Savannah, Georgia to a career fair and found this company, Italian Aerospace and Defense Company. That's where I kind of got my executive start and started to build a career. That went well, for the first time that I was actually not fired from a job and was able to leave that one on my own. Made my way over to Philips Healthcare. I ran a very large P&L, about $800 million P&L at the time. One of the second or third largest divisions within Philips Healthcare, and my career was starting to pick up and started to move forward. I was recruited by a boutique private equity company to go in and take this technology, which is what we talked about actually this morning, using facial recognition software over in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to help immigrants come into the country and then keep track of them. A lot of synergies to what's going on today. Yep. And that fell apart. The private equity company was not able to fund this. And so I essentially had left a really good job to do this. Didn't pan out the way that I had hoped. And I'd also invested in this gym. At the time, I was doing a lot of travel for work. I got really sick and kind of looked in the mirror. I was like, look, man, I'm not eating right. I'm fat. I'm not working out. Yeah. I just wasn't taking care of myself anymore. And so I kind of doubled down on health and fitness. And that changed my life. And so I said, I like this. I think I can run a pretty good CrossFit gym. So I decided to open up a CrossFit facility in Salem, New Hampshire. So I searched and I found a building that had, been vacant for 7 years and needed a lot of work. And so I'd come home from work, Philips Healthcare, and at night I would renovate this thing by myself, 12,000 square feet, ton of backbreaking work. And it took a couple months, and I opened up on Veterans Day, I believe, like 2013. First year, things were going great. We went from 0 to about 75 members, and I made a very critical business mistake. And, business success is built on multiple failures. I mean, if you're starting the company, you just have to count on the unexpected and failing forward over and over and over.
95% of businesses fail within the first 5 years.
That's it. So my mistake that I made was I used all of my cash. And I thought, okay, things are good. We're established. I can dip into my cash reserves. And I renovated the rest of this building with the money that I had. And lo and behold, that was the year that we had like record snowstorms. We were dumping snow in the Boston Harbor that year. And, when you look at that January, it was like historically the number of days that we had below like 15 degrees set a record. Yeah. And my heating bills went from $2,000 a month to $15,000 a month. And I just couldn't keep up. Like the gym couldn't support that. And so I got behind. And at one point, I was about $45,000 in debt to Liberty Utilities. And I was paying them $6,000, $7,000, $8,000. Stopped paying myself. Did everything I could to just keep up with this. And eventually, I was paying this down as it warmed up. So fast forward to August of that year, and in walks this guy into my gym. And I had paid this down from $45,000, and I think it was, don't quote me on this, but it was $3,000 to $4,000 were left on that bill. And he walks in, and it was a hot day like today. And it was about, 8:30 in the morning, and he said, "Hey, we need to shut your power off." I said, "Okay, like why? Like what's going on?" Yeah. And he said, "Well, I said, I'm going to need this. It's going to be cool. How long is it going to be off?" He said, "Well, until you pay your bill." I said, "What? Like I don't get it. Like why today after 10 months?" And so, long story short, he leaves. He comes back. I'm going to pay this bill. At that time, I used to carry concealed. I used to carry my West Point. I mean, if you're watching from out of state, I mean, New Hampshire's a very conservative state with respect to the Second Amendment. I've always been a big Second Amendment supporter. Very comfortable around weapons. It was a licensed pistol. I actually have a lot of training, like license to carry conceal.
And we weren't constitutional carry at that time.
Yeah, maybe. I can't remember.
No,
but
I think that happened afterwards.
Yep. But this guy, so when I went out to show him this bill, he was somebody that was opposed to guns.
Yeah.
And he saw that sticking out of I had the holster on under my shirt, and he got nervous. And I'm going to cut out some of the details because this could be a long story. But he essentially calls back and says, hey, I'm here trying to do a disconnect, but I feel nervous about this guy because he's got a gun on him.
Yeah.
And so the woman he was speaking to spoke to her manager, who spoke to somebody else, who brought in security, looped in, and it was a game of telephone.
Yeah.
And the way I understand it was the call that was made from Liberty Utilities to Salem was, our guy is trying to do a disconnect and he's being threatened at gunpoint.
Love a game of telephone.
Yeah. So the police show up, as you might imagine.
Oh, yeah.
And they take position behind, 28, they're behind this fence. We couldn't see him.
Yeah.
And while I'm there, another coach, good buddy of mine, we were both outside, and one of the cops accidentally squeezed the trigger.
Yep.
And fired off a round. And the bullet missed me by 6 inches, is what, kind of the forensics and everything afterwards. And it went right by me, and it went into my gym, and it hit a squat rack where I had another coach working out with a client. By the grace of God, nobody was hurt, but obviously this was a pretty big deal.
Yep.
And in the aftermath, they charged the coach that was standing next to me with criminal threatening. They said he made a gun-like gesture with his finger. That never happened.
Even if it did, that's not cause.
I've even said that. Even if it did, make a gun-like gesture. You're behind. We're military.
Yeah.
You're behind cover and concealment. It's broad daylight.
He can't see you.
He can't see us. And the coach, had just finished a jiu-jitsu session. And he was in basically like those, we call them Ranger panties, like the really short shorts.
Yeah.
That's all he was wearing. No shirt, nothing. It didn't happen. And even if it did, terrible excuse. You got to be better than that. So they said to this coach, they charged him first on the spot. He freaked out. They said, they found some marijuana on him. They said, we won't charge you with this big crime if you sign this document saying you're not going to sue the police and you admit guilt to possession of marijuana. He did. About a month later, I get called and they tell me, you're being charged with criminal threatening with a deadly weapon. And I was facing 22 years in state prison. Now, in the aftermath of this, I mean, it was all over the news.
Yeah.
The cops had colluded. We were going to try to fire up this video. We have it. The actual video from the detective interviewing the guy from Liberty Utilities. I showed this to you, and remember
he actually said we have the Liberty we have the police and the Liberty Utilities guy. We have everybody on board with the statement.
Which,
if you know anything about trying to gather a statement, you're not trying to get witnesses to cooperate. You're trying to get witnesses to give their statements, and then you're trying to separately from the witnesses look at their statements and cooperate their stories yourself. And see where things line up, because no two people give the exact same story because everyone's got a different vantage point.
Right. And yet there was all these statements that said the exact same thing, but they were on camera, and that ended up helping us later on down the road. But he literally says, I talked to your head of security. He's on board with this statement. So it was this collusion.
Yeah.
And so I mean I was terrified. I'll be honest with you. My the business I lost the business. It folded. That winter, I think by that December, so I was arrested end of September. That was my 40th birthday. I spent that in the woods at the Robert Frost farm, like just distraught. Like I'm charged with a Class B felony.
Yeah.
My business was collapsing. I didn't have the money. I made a critical business mistake, by spending all of that. Single dad, 4 children, faced with the crime. Like, what am I going to do? And my attorney said, well, I mean, you've got the fact that you didn't commit a crime, and you've got the fact that you actually have the law on your side. Like, you're allowed to carry a weapon, but do you really want to put your fate in the hands of a jury? Like, you're facing what's going to be the best years of your life that you could be behind bars.
And a jury could go any which way depending on how they happen to feel about it.
That's right. So I went bankrupt. My house went into foreclosure.
Yeah.
My car, I was hiding in the woods, so the repo man couldn't find it because I lost my car. I wouldn't even be able to work or anything.
Exactly what that feels like.
Yep. And I went through an entire winter that year. The power got shut off here, and I went through an entire winter with no electricity and no heat. And so, I mean, it was awful. And I had 4 little kids, and we lived down in the basement, and I got really good at cooking mac and cheese on a potbelly stove. And we just, I almost said, all right, I'll admit to this crime, because they did the same thing to me. They said, we'll let you sign, we'll drop this criminal threatening charge if you'll take a misdemeanor disturbing the peace. But I still would have had a criminal record. Oh, by the way, I lost my promotion. I was supposed to get promoted to major. At the time this shows up, and Army's like, yep, I got flagged. So my whole world fell apart. My entire world fell apart during this time. That December for Christmas, I sold my high school class ring. I sold everything I had to be able to give the kids, Christmas that year. And we cut our tree down in the backyard. It was this pathetic looking thing that we set up, and didn't have the electricity to light it. But, nonetheless, we made our ornaments, and we had a really good Christmas. And actually, I remember Kevin saying to me, Dad, this is the best Christmas we ever had, which is crazy, because it wasn't about gifts. It was about the fact that I just had the time to spend with these kids. And they went back. My arrangement, was that I would have the kids through Christmas, and the next day they would go back. So December 26th of 2014, that was the lowest day of my entire life.
Yeah. Christmas
was over. My kids went back. I'm sitting in a cold, dark house by myself. I'm facing 22 years in prison. My business is gone. I'm declaring bankruptcy. I've got nothing left. And I've just been humiliated too, publicly.
Oh, yeah.
And I went up to that bathroom right up there, and I just decided that I couldn't do this anymore. I felt betrayed by the system. I felt betrayed by so many different people and entities. And I took that same class pistol and I put it in my mouth, and I almost pulled that trigger.
Yeah.
And I remember I had tears streaming down my eyes, and I was ready to just be done with everything. And I thought to myself, if I do this now, I will forever ruin Christmas for my kids. And I couldn't do that to them. That felt incredibly selfish. So I was like, I am going to persist. Just hang on for a couple more days. And I had this whole plan, shed. It was dark, right? So I dropped the magazine, and I opened the window in the bathroom, and I fired that gun out the window. And this is actually, I keep this. This is actually the shell casing from that day. I kept this for years in my drawer. I don't know why. I just had this encased in acrylic a little while ago, probably about 2 months ago, because now it means something. So I fired that gun out the window, and I said, I'm not going to do it today. I will wait for a couple days. When that day came that I initially intended to take my life, It was a sunny, warmer day in January. My dog Gunner at the time was like playing me and like nudging me and stuff like that. And so let me just get you back in here. We've moved a little bit. Sorry, we're not professionals here. Bear with us. So that day came, and I was like, you know what? Today's a good day. Like, I'm gonna enjoy it. Like, I'm in no rush. So, and I ended up living day by day by day. And for about 6 months, the plan was I'll take my life tomorrow, and I'd wake up and I'd say I'm strong enough to make it through today. During that time, while I waited for this trial, because it took 18 months, I had this felony. Nobody would touch me. I had a master's degree from MIT, master's in public. Nobody would hire me. The only job I could find was I took the used colonoscopy scopes at the Manchester VA from the procedure room down to the basement. So I was taking these nasty scopes that had been in like old dudes' asses down to the basement to be sterilized for $7.50 an hour.
I know that.
Incredibly humbling, but I was determined at this point, like, I'm going to fight this. I'm going to grind. And so I just started working, and we had the trial. Ultimately the trial came. It was a 3-day trial. And 3 days of testimony, all this stuff, the video I showed you, everything came out. A jury deliberated for 20 minutes after 3 days. A jury, and not only did they deliberate, they had to pick a jury foreman. They had to decide where they're going to order lunch from, and they all ordered lunch, and then they decided that this case was total bullshit, and it was, I was vindicated. And then a judge actually annulled the arrest. So it wasn't even like everything was sealed. The judge took the step to annul the arrest so that it didn't even legally exist. So I was completely vindicated, but they ruined me for 18 months. And it almost cost me my life.
And you can't get even if you could get everything else back, you can't get the time back.
Right.
And you can't get the pain back, and you can't get, and there's no dollar amount that can describe having to have that feeling.
Yeah. And it wasn't even done. So the first job back, like real job, was I became CEO of this like small landscape company up in Maine. And I was driving from Derry up to Portland, Maine. So it was a 96-mile drive there and back every single day. And we built that company from about 7 million, and we grew it, and we acquired other companies. And it became, that portfolio of companies became over $100 million. We did that relatively short period of time. Lots of different awards. I was CEO of the year for the Snow and Ice Management. I won a CEO award there. But the thing I was most proud of with that company was a company of about 400 people, where we estimated about 60% of our employee base was in recovery for fentanyl or drugs or alcohol, whatever that looked like. We made the Maine best places to work list for the first time in the company's 25-year history. So I was able to give these folks more than just a job. We were able to give them a career where they had something to look forward to and something to hope. And that was so rewarding. But I mentioned earlier that I was afraid to tell this story, and I went dark. There was a time I couldn't sleep. And you guys probably, when you're laying in bed and you got to get up maybe to go to the airport, something early, and it's just like, I can't fall asleep, and now I know I've got to wake up in a couple hours.
Staring at the ceiling.
Exactly. So it's funny how God works, because that happened, and I ended up saying, screw it, I'm just going to get up and go to work. So I left around 4 o'clock in the morning. I think I'm gonna get into the office, and I'm gonna have some quiet time to myself. And when I get in, there's my number 2 is already there, and he says, "Hey man, what are you doing here so early?" I was like, "Well, blah blah blah." He said, "Well, listen, I don't use the kid's real name. We call him Kyle in the story, but he said Kyle's in the conference room. Can you talk to him?" And I was like, "Yeah. What's going on?" He said, "Well, his girlfriend broke up with him. He relapsed, and just out in our parking lot, he took his hunting shotgun and he put it under his chin, and it jammed. It didn't go off. Can you talk to him?" And so I was like, what am I going to say to this kid? So I go into the conference room. I sit down. His eyes are all puffy and snots are coming out of his nose. And the CEO, like he doesn't want to. He felt embarrassed. He's a young 25-year-old kid, and he won't really open up to me.
Yeah.
And so I sat down and I was like, all right, here we go. And I said, look, bro, I know what it tastes like to have a loaded gun in your mouth. And this is how I did it. And we sat for about 2.5 hours, just kind of talking through resiliency and how you can pivot and how you can come back, even though it feels like, you're never going to live to see another day. And he left and he stayed with the company. And a couple months later, we had our company Christmas party. And I invited families and everybody could come. And this woman came up to me and she said, "Are you Chris?" I said, "I am." She says, she goes, "I'm Kyle's mom. And Kyle said you're the reason he's alive today."
That means something.
I mean, in that moment, I knew why all this shit happened.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay. I was no longer embarrassed to kind of tell this story. I still didn't really openly share it, but that's when you start to realize, like, you can be an example. And so I built this company because nothing is ever easy. I ended up getting fired from that company because there was some shady stuff going on with the way revenue was being reported. Can't really talk about it too much because I'm still under an NDA from that settlement. But suffice it to say, we had a difference in kind of principles.
Yeah.
And I held my ground, and ultimately I lost my job, and I had to Uber home from Portland, Maine. So 2 years into making this private equity company, a ton of money, turning it around, winning all these awards, both personally and as a company, told no thank you. And at that point, I was like, I'm done. I'm done working for people.
Yeah.
I'm going to bet on myself.
Yeah.
And so I formed a company called American Facilities Professionals. And first 2 years, I did all the jobs myself.
Yeah.
First job, I changed 110 ceiling tiles in Waterville, Maine. It was like, that's like 4.5, 5 hour drive through the night, back-breaking work. I think I put like maybe $300-400 in my pocket, right?
Yeah.
But it was like grind. It was my own. I took incredible pride. And the thing was, my mantra at that time was, I'm going to do the best job for the shitty jobs that nobody else wants to do.
Yeah.
One time I filled like some cinder block to keep the mice from coming in. And when I left, I had all the like foam and mouse crap just stuck to my arm hairs. I had to like shave my arms. It was hysterical.
I had to replace ceiling tiles once. And
Brutal.
It was in a daycare center that was rat infested. And as soon as we took down the first ceiling
It all
tile,
falls on you. Yeah.
Rat
Right.
all over me. I'm like, I still have hours in hundreds of ceiling tiles to replace. I hate this.
Yeah, exactly.
I
Like,
hate this.
what am I doing here, right? What am I doing? So I'm building this company. I was driving for Uber and Lyft if I didn't have jobs, like anything I could to just kind of make the money and make ends meet. Managed to kind of, have build up about 25K.
Yep.
And we signed our first contract with a company in Merrimack. It was a senior living facility. And like, sweet, we made it. First big recurring revenue. What happens? COVID hits. And so they're like, hey man, we can't bring in anybody new. And I thought, this is how it ends. Like, how am I, as a one-person shop, going to build a company through this pandemic? So I feel bad for myself. But at this point, I'm starting to build some resiliency genes, right? And I called a buddy of mine who had, we had served together. He was over at the VA, and I was like, listen, like, how are you thinking about this COVID thing when it hits?
Yep.
And again, another kind of long story how we got started on this, but they turned me onto this hypochlorous acid. And hypochlorous acid you didn't really hear about, but it was 1,000 times more powerful than bleach.
Yep.
But it's used in ophthalmic surgery, and they spray it in your eyes, and you could actually even drink it. I don't suggest it, but it's that safe. And I thought, you know what? COVID has created a level playing field amongst companies.
Yep.
Nobody knows what to do. And I'm by myself. I'm a one-person company. I had some people I started to work with, but I was like, I'm going to outthink everybody and outmaneuver them.
Yep.
So I invested the money that I had. It was like win or die trying. So I pushed kind of all my chips in and said, we're gonna start making hypochlorous acid.
Yep.
So the only thing I could buy were these like liter containers to make this stuff, right? But we started making it right here in this kitchen. It's salt and water stabilized with vinegar, put through an electrolyzed process. I could make a gallon of hypochlorous acid for about $1.50.
Okay.
It was selling at the time on the market for anywhere from $150 to $175 a gallon. That felt like highway robbery to me, and I also wanted to feel like I was playing a role in this. So we were selling it to municipalities, and my buddy's a cop. We were selling it to him, selling it for 75 to 80. Still amazing margins.
Oh, yeah.
And then I hired landscapers and painters and anybody that was out of work because the government decided they needed to be shut down, which is another thing with government, just, picking and choosing the winners and losers.
Yeah.
We started making hypochlorous acid and doing disinfections as far away as Kansas. And so if people would call, we would jump in the car, we would load up with our electrostatic sprayers and these gallons of this liquid I made and the testing strips and everything that, to document what we were doing. And for months, we would do 5, 6, 7 jobs, just 7 days a week around the clock, grinding. And American Facilities was basically born. And so I had money and I started investing back into the company and started hiring people. And what happened was we developed a reputation for being transparent, for being go-getters, taking care of our customers, not ripping them off when we probably could have driven more of a margin, and just being good dudes.
Yeah.
And so when COVID died down, all those people that we helped said, hey, can you take care of this and take care of that? And we ended up winning a bunch of national accounts. Mm-hmm. And American Facilities just took off. And so today, American Facilities is, let's see, this keeps on, sorry, man, I keep losing here. Today, American Facilities operates in 44 states. And we were named last year to the Inc. 5000 list. We are the #1 fastest growing private company here in New Hampshire. We were the 411th fastest growing company in the entire country. And then this year, I found out the Daniello Institute for Veterans and Military Families, which is part of Syracuse University, determined that my company is the 38th fastest veteran-owned company in the country.
Nice.
And so to go from this to this in about 7 years is something I'm pretty proud of. Yeah. And so there's a lot of great things that came out of that. Yeah. One, like we talked about at the outset, don't ever give up.
No.
Because you can change your story at any point. And whatever that looks like all of us go through the shit at some point. And it's just about solving your problems. Yeah. And there's this scene at the end of the movie, The Martian, if you've ever seen it. It's a great movie, Matt Damon. You watch the whole credits, there's a cut scene at the very end.
Matt Damon.
And he says, and he says, he's talking about surviving on Mars, and he says, did I farm in my own shit? Yes, Bob, everyone laughs. He goes, look, when you get into these situations that are life and death, it's about solving your problems. And you solve one problem, and we did that. You solve one problem, you take that next step, and boom, you run into another wall. Yep. But if you solve enough of your problems, you get to go home.
Yeah.
And that always resonated with me. So it was like, look, building this company, we failed so many times. American Facilities is on version probably 8.0.
Yep.
It's about figuring out what works, solving your problems, outthinking your competition, playing the long game, being smart, being patient. And honestly, that's kind of how I've been living my life. Now, in 2021, as I'm building this company and we're starting to get bigger and I've got a lot on my plate, the Army calls me. Now, the same Army that decided I wasn't good enough back when I was having the police shooting, they didn't need me then. They called me and asked me if I would come back in. And
for military guys, we get it. Like losing out on a promotion that big and having that moment taken away from you, that's an identity crisis.
Was, man. That hurt the most. That
for
hurt the
us
most.
Who serve, like it hits you at your core.
Yeah.
Like I missed out on promotions for similar reasons.
Your story.
And
yeah.
it like that just wrecks you inside because you're like, what am I doing this for?
Right.
Like after everything we put into this. And similar story with the company too. I have a cleaning company. We worked through COVID.
Yep.
So like, and I've been in that moment too. So it's like you've accomplished an insane amount in such a short amount of time. And I don't think it can be glossed over or and I don't think it can be highlighted enough how big of a deal that is.
Yeah, it is.
To literally go from that to that.
Yeah, and then when the Army called back in 2021, they're like, "Hey, we need you. Like, we can use your skill set." So, I guess as something else that I'm kind of proud of is like, you know what, you guys did me dirty a little bit, but I swore an oath, and if you need me to come back, I'm in. And so there I was at 46 years old, jumping out of airplanes again, which hurt a lot more than it did when I was 18 and 19 years old. But yeah, so that's my story, right? Like it took a lot when I was initially asked if I'd ever thought about running for Congress. My first thought was, dude, this is the last thing I want to do. Right. Like I just want to relax for a little bit. Like it's been a grind to get here. And I'm finally in a spot where I've got, things on a good trajectory. My kids are getting older. I have time to spend with them. Why would I want to run for Congress and have all these people coming after me? And then we get asked this all the time, but I guess just at the end of the day, like I love this country. And it's weird. I know some people roll their eyes. It sounds cliche. Like we get it. Like military guys, like it's not just a saying. Like I genuinely love this country, and having been all over the world serving this, in different roles or traveling for business, this is the best place. Mm-hmm. And I'm genuinely alarmed with the direction that this country's going. And I think my unique experiences of one, being able to relate to people who have really suffered from bad government or bad policies or just bad luck, misfortune, to kind of help people and understand, like, this is how you can come back. This is how you can grind. And then to combine that with my geopolitical experience from the military and from, working in international business, for Italian companies, working in China, it gives me a very unique perspective that I think I approach things with from a level of strategy, a level of empathy, and just that look, like we're facing some dark, gloomy days. Yeah. But we can pivot this country back. And this country, I can't remember a time where we've been more polarized. And we have to come back together. Mm-hmm. Like you and I are both staunch Republicans. Like we have strong conservative values. And we talked about this morning at the breakfast event that we were at.
Conservatives, not just Republicans, solutionary minded.
Americans.
We care about solutions more than we care about the politics. Or the game.
Right.
People say it's a game, but if it were a game, it's more like the Game of Thrones. It's the game that if you play it wrong, you don't come back from.
Yeah.
And I think we're playing it wrong. And I think where you're trying to take this and trying to step up, hopefully with you and enough people like you in DC, we might actually be able to pivot this country back to where it needs to go. My friend Sonny Johnson always says, this country has never failed to produce the generation that will save it. And right now it's our generation.
Yeah. Well, that's amen. Right. It's like, if not now, when?
Mhm.
And if not me, who?
Exactly.
Now, I mean, I'm certainly not the gift to politics or to saving this country. I get it. I didn't really even want to be doing this, but I think if we can build a group of people that are willing to kind of put politics aside and say, like, we are going to act in the best interests of this country,
Mhm.
and weather the storm. I mean, the attacks are coming daily now. I mean, the amount of hate mail I get, we must be doing something right. All these idiots reaching out to me, telling me I'm a traitor and this, like, whatever. That's adorable. Yeah, it's about, like, let's stay focused on the mission.
Mhm.
Let's keep grinding. Let's keep pushing, and let's see if we can make a difference. And if we run this process and we stay true to our principles and don't let this whole political game change you, I do think that we can go to Washington, D.C.
Yep.
We can build a movement of people that are actually tired of the polarization and tired of the fighting. And maybe we can actually get back to having civic discourse.
Yep.
And be able to start making a difference. That's my political thesis, and that's what I'm banking on. And we have 9 weeks to see if this message is going to resonate. So I guess on that note, we are wrapping this up.
Yeah.
And we talked for a long time.
I will say this. I'm optimistic. I'm actually legitimately optimistic. We have very similar stories, but dealing with where we are in the country and seeing where we can go versus the direction that we're heading down now, it seems I digested like you do, an insane amount of news, media reports, legislation, combing through things, and I'm seeing the average person not just wake up, but look at both sides of the aisle like they're petulant children who need to get their crap together.
Yeah.
Like, clean your room, do what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
Like, I should not have to hunt you down to get you to do exactly what you said you were going to do on the campaign trail.
Man.
Like, you sat there in my face, you shook my hand, you said you weren't going to betray me when you get to DC, and then I look up your voting record and I'm going, you became exactly the problem you said you weren't going to be. And I know the vast majority of the country, like we were talking about earlier this week, we care about paying our bills, having clothes on our back, food on the table in our bellies and in our pantry, paying our rent, have a roof over our head, being able to pay our energy bills and to heat and cool our houses. Hopefully at the end of the week, we have a 6-pack of beer to, to just cool it all down and relax for a moment. Maybe we'll be able to retire one day and hopefully we can pass down something to our kids other than debt.
Yeah, right.
And I think if you keep going on this path, and the more we're out there and the more we're talking to people and the more people get to hear your story and understand that the darkest days are not ahead of us. They are behind us, depending on what your next step is going to be. And the next step isn't always the step you want to take, but it's the step you have to take. You don't get to be this washboard abs on beach season without first stepping onto the squat rack or the treadmill. You have to go that first day.
That's it.
You don't get to be heavyweight champ by stepping in the ring one time. And get to be Ali or Rocky Marciano or Tyson. You got to step in the ring every single day, endlessly, no matter how bad it gets, no matter how hard you get punched in the face.
That's it.
And I think you got it.
Keep showing up.
Yeah.
Well, listen, brother, this was you got me to say the story finally on camera. Thank you all for listening. Having put this out there, and so now it's for God and country and the whole world, I guess, to see. So that's my story. That's why I'm running for Congress. We've got 9 weeks from this past Tuesday before the primary. So we are in the fourth quarter, and we've got a fight ahead of us, right? I do think that this is an important election, and it matters who we put forward. So I appreciate all your support. Talk to your friends. We'll post this video. Forward the video around. Like, help us get the word out there. My website is chrisbright.org. Check that out. I've got my policies up there. Next week, let's talk some policy.
Yep.
I think we maybe we'll come back. We'll talk about the border. Let's talk about economy. Let's talk about housing. Some of the things that we're hearing as we go around the district. But
some things in upcoming agenda that people are proposing, things that we agree with, things that you agree with, things that the ideas that you have surrounding immigration, stuff like that.
Yeah, let's do it. So thank you all. Joe Biden's doing his press conference in 34 minutes, so grab your popcorn. That should be fun.
A big boy press conference.
Yeah, right now it's the season finale of the United States of America. But listen, all jokes aside, this is an important election. We think we have a great plan here. We've got a great team built around us that we're putting together some good policy issues. We're gaining some tremendous momentum. And the more support, the better. It empowers me. Plus, we need all the help we can get, especially as an outsider. Like, everyone likes outsiders.
Yeah.
But my biggest Achilles heel is like when I first launched back in October, they're like, Chris Bright, never heard of her. So thank you all. We'll do this again next week. I appreciate everybody. Brother, thank you so much. We will talk to you all soon. Take it easy.
We need your vote. We need your donations. Please help.
Yes, sir.
Please support.